A handbell is a bell designed to be rung by hand. To ring a handbell, a ringer grasps the bell by its slightly flexible handle, traditionally made of leather, but often now made of plastic, and moves the wrist to make the hinge clapper inside the bell strike. An individual handbell can be used simply as a signal to catch people's attention or summon them together, but handbells are generally heard in tune sets. History. The first tuned handbells were developed by brothers Robert and William Corr in Aldburn, Wiltshire, England, between 1696 and 1724. The Corr brothers originally made Latin bells for hame boxes, but for reasons unknown, they began tuning the bells more finely to have an accurate fundamental tone, and fitted them with hinge clappers that moved only in one plane. Originally, tune sets of handbells, such as the ones made by the Corr brothers, were used by change ringers to rehearse outside the towers. Tower bell ringers' enthusiasm for practicing the complicated algorithms of change ringing can easily exceed the neighbors' patience. So in the days before modern sound control, handbells offered them a way to continue ringing without the oral assault. The handbell sets used by change ringers had the same number of bells as in the towers, generally 6 or 12 tuned to a diatonic scale. Handbells were first brought to the United States from England by Margaret Shawcliffe in 1902. She was presented with a set of 10 handbells in London, by Arthur Hughes, the general manager of the Whitechapel Bell Foundry, after completing 2 separate 2.5-hour change ringing peals in one day. Terminology. The bells used in American handbell choirs are almost always English handbells. English handbells is a reference to a specific type of handbells, not to the country of origin. While some American handbell choirs do use bells made in England, the majority play bells made either by Malmark Bell craftsmen or by Schul-Merrick Bells, both based in Pennsylvania. In the United Kingdom, there is a distinction between American handbells and English handbells. English handbells are traditional, with leather clapper heads and handles, while American handbells use modern materials, such as plastic and rubber, to produce the same effect. In America, however, they are all called English handbells. Characteristics. The 2 major defining characteristics of English handbells are the clappers and ability to produce overtones. The clapper on an English handbell is on a hinge and moves back and forth in a single direction, unlike a school bell in which the clapper swings freely in any direction. It also has a spring that holds the clapper away from the casting after the strike to allow the bell to ring freely. Furthermore, the shaft of the clapper is rigid, such that the bell may be held with its mouth facing upward. The overtones on an English handbell are a 1/12 above the fundamental, while Dutch handbells, such as Petty and Amp, Fritzen, focus on the overtone a minor 1/10 or a major 1/10 above the fundamental. Handbells can weigh as little as 7 ounces or upwards of 18 pounds. Handbell performance. A handbell choir or handbell ensemble. A handbell team is a group that rings recognizable music with melodies and harmony, as opposed to the mathematical permutations used in change ringing. The bells used generally include all notes of the chromatic scale within the range of the bell set, while a smaller group uses only 25 bells. The sets are often larger, ranging up to an 8-octave set. The bells are typically arranged chromatically on foam-covered tables. These tables protect the bronze surface of the bell, as well as keep the bells from rolling when placed on the sides. Unlike an orchestra or choir in which each musician is responsible for one line of the texture, a bell ensemble acts as one instrument, with each musician responsible for particular notes, sounding his or her assigned bells whenever that note appears in the music. Handbell music. Handbell choirs generally ring music composed or arranged specifically for the instruments because of the highly resonant sound, the limited note range of a handbell set, and the unique pitch-by-pitch division of the staff among the ringers. There are several major publishers providing printed handbell music such as the Hope Publishing Company, the Lorenz Corporation, and Alfred Music Publishing, as well as free sites from individual composers and arrangers. Costs associated with handbell music typically result from shipping and dissemination, as most scores do not permit duplication and must be purchased individually for each ringer in the handbell choir. The coordination of the bell ringers requires a different approach than other ensembles. All the ringers read from a complete score. This score is similar to a piano score, but with an additional convention. The C# above middle C and all notes below are always written in the bass clef, and the DB above middle C in all notes above are always written in the treble clef. Handbell music is written one octave lower than the actual sound the bells make, so a middle C bell or bell is actually playing a note with a high C frequency. Due to handbell's relative rarity outside of the confines of church services, although less so now than in the 1980s and early 1990s, the majority of pieces composed and arranged for handbells last approximately 4 minutes. A few composers and arrangers write longer and more intricate works for handbells. Generally, these pieces use handbells in combination with other instruments. Ringing techniques. To ring a handbell, the ringer moves it in such a way that the clapper strikes the inside surface of the bell, usually holding it against his or her shoulder, bell upwards, and then swinging the bell through an elliptical shape to cause the clapper to strike the casting of the bell. The tone of the bell will continue to resonate, decaying naturally until it stops completely, or until the ringer stops the tone by damping the bell with a hand on the body or on a padded surface. Handbell techniques have changed very much over the years. Donald Allure, founding director of Westminster Concert Bell Choir, is credited with fully realizing an American off-the-table style of ringing that includes many non-ringing sound effects, including stopped techniques such as plucking the clapper with the bell on the table. He is also credited for promoting precise damping and stopping of the bell sound by touching the bell casting to a soft surface, in the service of more musical results. Multiple bell techniques. Traditional ringing technique only allows one ringer to ring 2 bells at a time, depending on the number of bells needed for a particular piece of music and the number of ringers in a choir. It may be necessary for each ringer to ring more than 2 bells at a time or in short succession. There are also many techniques that change the sound of the bell as it is rung. For bells, there are 2 main ways of ringing 2 handbells with one hand, 4-in-hand and Shelley. In the 4-in-hand technique, ringers hold 2 bells in one hand with the clappers at right angles to each other. This allows the ringer to either move the hand, normally a ring knuckles first, to ring 2 different bells independently with the same hand. The 2 bells can also be played together by holding the wrist at a 45-degree angle. 2 opposing viewpoints exist regarding the merits of this technique. While some believe that Shelley ringing is rendered obsolete when 4-in-hand is perfected, others believe that the control, balance and precision offered by Shelley ringing makes the technique more applicable in certain ringing situations. In large ensembles, 4-in-hand is typically used to ring multiple positions or pick up accidentals. Shelley ringing is similar, except that the clappers are each positioned the same direction. Using this technique, a ringer can then ring 2 bells simultaneously with one movement. Shelley is typically used to ring 2 notes an octave apart. The motion of the clappers in the same plane makes feasible techniques which generally require this, such as martellato, vibrato and shake, all of which are difficult to achieve with 4-in-hand ringing. The Shelley technique can also be used to ring 2 notes separately by striking the primary bell sideways and the secondary bell forward in an action like tapping the fingers. 6 bells. There are several ways to play 6 bells at a time. One way is to pick 2 bells up as if one were Shelley ringing, then pick the third up between one's little and ring fingers. All 3 bells ring together when ringing in a knocking motion. A second way is to pick up the third bell sideways so that the clapper swings outward. Ringers with good control can then ring the first bell without ringing the third bell, allowing the ringer to play 3 different notes in one hand. Weaving is the technique of playing a succession of bells by changing which bell is in each hand as required. This is used by bass bell ringers and solo, small ensemble ringers. The large size and weight of bass bells makes 4-in-hand ringing impractical, and often a solo, a small ensemble ringer will need to move up and down a range of bells, possibly sharing them with others. This technique means that more than 2 bells can be rung in short succession, using the table to damp the bell and free the hand to pick up the next bell. If the ringing sequence requires bells to be rung in tonal order, this technique often results in a weaving pattern, as the ringer must often reach across the body for the next bell in the sequence. Weaving can also be used in combination with the 4-in-hand in a technique called traveling 4-in-hand. By combining the ability to hold 2 bells in each hand with the ability to quickly drop and pick up the secondary bell of a 4-in-hand, a ringer has quick access to several bells. Other techniques. There are other ways to play music with handbells besides traditional ringing. Other techniques include plucking, shaking, table damping, and malleting bells. Echo technique adds a brief pulse of increased volume to a sustained handbell note. This is accomplished by gently touching the rim of a vibrating bell to the padded table. Gyro is a handbell technique that involves holding the bell in a vertical position, then rotating it either clockwise or counterclockwise slowly to create a small vibrating sound. This technique can also be done horizontally to push the sound outwards. Malleting bells involves using one of several types of rubber, plastic or yarn-wrapped mallet to strike the casting of the bell. This can create a staccato tone when the casing is pressed into padding, a normal ringing tone when the bell is suspended, or even a drum roll effect when multiple mallets are used to multiple hits on the bell plate. Suspended malleting can be employed to create a bell tree which allows many bells to be played by one ringer. Martellato also creates a staccato tone and is accomplished by striking the bell into the foam-covered table in such a way that the clapper strikes the casting immediately after the bell strikes the foam. A variation, called a mart lift, is accomplished by lifting the bell casting off the table very soon after the clapper strikes. This creates a staccato tone followed by a softened sounding of the bell. Plucking is accomplished by using the thumb and forefinger to force the clapper head into the casting while the bell is on the table with the handle toward the player, producing a staccato tone. Each pluck is a single note. Shaking is accomplished by rapidly ringing the bell back and forth so that the clapper strikes both the front and back of the bell casting in quick succession. This technique creates a continuous sound, as opposed to normal ringing in which the tone decays rapidly after being rung. Because of the size, bass bells are rarely shaken. Instead, if a shaking sound is desired from a bass bell, the bell is suspended and a mallet roll is played. The singing bell technique creates a sustained pitch similar to the sound a wine glass makes as its rim is stroked with a wet fingertip. and is accomplished in much the same way. A short wooden dowel stick is touched to the outside of the rim of a handbell, which is being held in the other hand. The dowel is then used to stroke the rim of the bell in a circular or stirring motion. The singing bell technique is adapted from the singing bowl tradition of Tibet. A tower swing is when the bell is rung and then swung down and a bit behind the ringer and back up to a normal position. Doing this creates an echo effect. The mouth of the bell must rotate around to create the sound change that resemble a tower bell. Usually this is done over a period of 3 or 4 beats worth of time. Thumb dam technique provides a staccato sound similar to plucking or malleting. This is often described as a tinkling sound. The bell is rung normally with the thumb or several fingers touching the outside of the bell below the rim. This damps the bell's sound immediately after it's rung. With smaller bells, this technique can often be easier than plucking or malleting because the bells don't have to lay on the table. Notation. There are a number of abbreviations and notations used exclusively or almost exclusively in handbell music. LV, R, SK, TD, place, a small, solid triangle, SW, BD and an upward arrow, usually with a curve at the bottom. Handbell tree. Handbells can be played as a handbell tree where the handles are interlaced within each other, allowing multiple bells to be played with mallets to obtain an undamped sound. This performance technique was invented by Louise Freyer in the 1980s. It was further developed by Barbara Brocker, who developed a standardized bell layout. It is practiced by many handbell soloists. The notational symbol used for handbell trees features a series of interlocking diagonal lines, one for each handbell used. The pitch of each bell is placed at the lowest point of each diagonal line. In popular culture, on the first episode of Season 29 of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood titled Noisy and Quiet, Mr. Rogers visits the Westminster Handbell Choir. In a Season 1 episode of New Girl, Jess heads a youth handbell ensemble.